Good day, everyone. Today, I will discuss the inferential statistics, specifically how it is used to determine whether there is a significant difference between two or more sample data sets. Before we proceed to our discussion, let us first look at our learning objectives. First, we will define inferential statistics. Next, we will discuss the meaning of a significant difference. And after that, we will learn how to distinguish between studies that compare two groups and those that compare three or more groups. Identify the two statistical tests commonly used to determine significant differences, the t-test and ANOVA. We will examine how inferential statistics is applied in educational research through practical classroom and research examples. What is inferential statistics? Inferential statistics is a branch of statistics that uses information collected from a sample to make conclusions about a population. Inferential statistics helps researchers make decisions and draw conclusions beyond the data they actually collected. Inferential statistics help researchers in several ways. First, it helps test hypotheses, which means determining whether a researcher's prediction is supported by the collected data. Second, it helps make predictions about a larger population based on the results obtained from a sample. Third one, it helps compare groups, such as comparing students who use different teaching methods. Finally, it helps researchers draw conclusions based on statistical evidence rather than personal opinions or assumptions. Imagine that the DepEd wants to know whether a new teaching strategy improves students' English speaking skills. How can inferential statistics help answer that question? Let's look at this example. The large group of people on the left, as you can see, these are the students that DepEd is interested in. This is called the population. Now, however, instead of assessing every student, researchers select only a small group of students shown on the right. This small group is called the sample. The researchers collect data only from this sample by evaluating their English speaking skills. After analyzing the results, inferential statistics allow the researchers to make conclusions about the larger population based on the information gathered from the sample. In the previous example, we saw a large group of students and a smaller group selected from them. These represent two important concepts in research. First one is population. What is a population? It is the entire group that a researcher wants to study. We also have a sample. A sample, on the other hand, is a smaller group selected from the population. For example, in the previous slide, all the students represented the population, while the smaller group selected for the study represented the sample. As shown in the flow diagram, the researcher begins by identifying the population, then selects a sample. The study is conducted using the sample, and finally, conclusions are made about the entire population. Many people think that the word significant simply means large or important. However, in statistics, it has a different meaning. A significant difference means that the difference we observe between groups is unlikely to have happened simply by chance. Just to let you know, researchers usually use a significant level, also called alpha, which is commonly set at 0.05. Suppose that two grade 6 classes are taught using different teaching methods. One class uses the traditional teaching method, while the other uses the storybook poster method. After the lesson, both classes take the same English achievement test. The traditional teaching group obtains an average score of 80, while the storybook poster group obtains an average score of 88. At first glance, we notice an 8-point difference. But as researchers, we should not immediately conclude that the storybook poster method is better. Instead, we ask an important research question. Is this 8-point difference truly caused by the teaching method, or could it simply be the result of chance? Inferential statistics helps us answer this question using statistical tests instead of personal opinions or assumptions. When a study compares only two groups, researchers use a statistical test called the t-test. If the study involves only two groups, researchers commonly use the independent samples t-test. Let's use the sample example from the previous slide. We have two groups of students. The first group is taught using the traditional teaching method, while the second group is taught using the storybook poster method. After both groups take the same English achievement test, we compare the average scores. Although the storybook poster group scored 88 and then the other one is 80, we still can't immediately conclude that one teaching method is better. Instead, we use independent sample t-tests. Whenever a research study compares exactly two independent groups, the t-test is usually the appropriate inferential statistical tool. Analysis of variance, commonly known as ANOVA, is an inferential statistical test used to determine whether there is a significant difference among the means of three or more groups. Unlike the t-test, which is only used when comparing two groups, ANOVA allows researchers to compare multiple groups at the same time. For example, suppose a school wants to know which teaching strategy produces the best mathematics performance among grade 8 students. The researcher compares three different teaching strategies: lecture method, cooperative learning, and query-based learning. After the assessment, you can see here that the average scores of the students are first 75, 82, and below is 88. Although inquiry-based learning has the highest average score, researchers cannot conclude immediately that it is the most effective strategy based only on the mean scores. Instead, they use ANOVA to analyze whether the difference among the three groups is statistically significant. ANOVA is the appropriate inferential statistical test when a researcher wants to compare the means of three or more groups. Suppose DepEd introduces a new reading program for grade 5 pupils. Researchers can compare the reading comprehension scores of pupils who participated in the program with those who did not. Another example is comparing traditional teaching with interactive teaching to determine which method produces better learning outcomes. Researchers can also evaluate classroom interventions such as using storybook posters, educational games, or digital learning materials. In all these situations, inferential statistics provides objective evidence to determine whether an educational intervention truly makes difference. Let's look at examples of research questions that require this statistical test. These are examples of research questions. Notice that each question asks whether there is a significant difference. The first question compares two independent groups, so the appropriate statistical test is the independent samples. The second one compares the same group before and after an intervention. In many cases, researchers would use a paired sample t-test because the measurement comes from the same participants at two different times. The third question compares three teaching strategies, so the appropriate statistical test is ANOVA. Recognizing the number of groups being compared helps researchers choose the correct statistical test. To summarize, inferential statistics allows researchers to use information collected from a sample to make conclusions about a larger population. One of its main purposes is to determine whether the difference observed between groups are statistically significant or simply due to chance. When comparing two groups, remember, researchers commonly use t-tests. When comparing three or more groups, they use analysis of variance or ANOVA. This statistical tool helps researchers make informed, objective, and evidence-based decisions instead of relying on assumptions. That's all for today, and thank you so much. Goodbye.